Good morning, dear students. So we are continuing in the cerebral palsy topic. This is the third part. After going through the spastic CP, the other type of CP is commonly we see other than spastic is athetosis, a condition that occurs when there is damage to the basal ganglia. Otherwise, in spastic CP, it is mostly due to the cortex is affected. Mainly the what we see is the periventricular leukomalacia. So, if basal ganglia is affected, that is, basal ganglia is the masses of gray matter composed of neurons located deep within the cerebral hemispheres of the brain, and it consists of different parts like substantia nigra, putamen, globus pallidus. So all those is there. So if the damage happens also to the basal ganglia, then we see what we have is called as athetosis, results in an overflow of motor impulses to the muscles. Here it is mainly the extrapyramidal system also being affected with the pyramidal system. So whenever the extrapyramidal system is affected, it leads to dystonia kind of CP. Athetosis is one type, and same characteristics, only thing is uncoordinated and involuntarily movements are become prominent. In this type itself, severe type, otherwise called as choric athetosis, in which there is, here it is only slow writhing movements, uncoordinated slow writhing movements which are involuntarily present. If the chorea is also present, then chorea is otherwise called as dance like movement. When cerebellum is affected, we have what we call as ataxic cerebral palsy. Conditions that occur when there is damage to cerebellum, which normally regulate the balance and muscle coordination. Cerebellum, as all of you are very well aware, that controls the equilibrium of the body, that is the balance and the coordination. So whenever that is affected, the muscle tone also reduces. We see child walking in an ataxic pattern, and hypotonicity, normal tone is reduced. So conditions, what happens is individual shows lack of balance and coordination necessary for proper arm and leg movement, causing a wide based gait to be exhibited. Individuals show difficulty with performing basic motor skills and patterns that include locomotor movements such as, that is, higher gross motor functions such as running, jumping and skipping. So what are the common characteristics in the cerebral palsy children, which is also in the domain, in the area of psychomotor? So we already have gone through some of them, and again we'll to make it familiarized. Seizures, spastic or rigidic muscle contractures may develop when restricted range of motion is severe. Hyperactive stretch reflex, scissoring gait or hemiplegic gait according to the topography of affect. Persistence of unwanted primitive reflexes and tremors. Involuntary movement may exhibit both hypertonic and hypotonic muscle tone. Low postural muscle tone, as in ataxic patients. So may be able to walk only with the unaided or with the arms held outside to the body. That is like ataxic. They put their arms horizontal position. Often under or overreaches, falls and stumbles easily. So how is the diagnosis? The diagnosis is, we have the medical and the physiotherapy diagnosis. So the diagnosis will be related to spastic paraparesis and the congenital ataxia. So basically it is due to ancillary studies such as radiographic studies, mainly CT scan, MRI scan, neonatal fetal monitoring and hematological studies of both the mother, and after delivery, it is mostly before the age of 2 years. It is very difficult to identify a child with cerebral palsy medically, but physiotherapeutically there are a lot of tools, screening tools, to identify the risk children who fall into the risk area. Transient dystonia of prematurity is a condition characterized by increased tone in the lower extremity, which is only seen between 4 to 14 months old often is confused with cerebral palsy. So this transient dystonia can be should come in the differential diagnosis. It can be confused, as we have earlier understood that in the beginning. So diagnosis is comparatively very difficult in the early infancy. So basically the diagnosis will require the knowledge of normal motor milestones and primitive reflexes. So an expert, a pediatrician or a pediatric neurologist with a good idea, or a physiotherapist with good expertise about the normal motor development milestones and primitive reflexes which should not persist. Persistence which is abnormality. So any persistence of primitive reflexes and the normal developmental milestones will be the identification of the factor for the delayed in their motor development. Motor development usually occurs in a cephalad, that is from the head to leg pattern. So first what we see is what the child achieves is a neck control, then the trunk control, then sitting balance. So such kind of the control, the motor control happens from the head to the leg direction, that is cephalad to caudal. And most of the time, and this also is related, this development is also related to the development of other sensory functions and autonomic functions also, such as sphincter control, like avoiding both bowel as well as bladder. Primitive reflex patterns of motor activity that are outgrown as part of the normal maturation process persist longer than normal, and in some cases permanently in children with cerebral palsy. So primitive reflex patterns should be present in a particular age group for a particular month, then it should be integrated. So this persistence is a major identifying factor in diagnosing the cerebral palsy. Neurological quotient can be determined, which is very useful for determining prognosis and treatment. Neurological quotients are there. We will discuss about that later. Coming to our area, the physiotherapist area, the area where we are mostly focusing is, there are a lot of screening and assessment tools which are available in diagnosing and screening and understanding the problems faced by the children, which is also useful for treatment. So it is not just a diagnosis, it's an assessment of the child also happens together. So first one is very important, GMFM, gross motor functional measure. Gross motor functional measure, 66 is the number of testing constructs. So 66 activities of the child will be measured. Later on we have this GMFM 88, which is actually more useful so GMFM, the GMFM 88, the gross motor functional measure 88 is nowadays the advanced tool used for measuring the gross motor function. Gross motor functions such as supine to prone, prone to supine, prone to kneeling, supine to sitting, sit to stand, those kind of activity, transient as well as static gross motor functional positions. So all the activities in these positions are measured in GMFM 88 and 60. Nowadays we don't use 66, we commonly use 88 because it is an advanced scale. So this is an outcome measure scale, So outcome measure screening assessment tools are very important in treating a physiotherapy in a physiotherapy treatment for cerebral palsy child. Alberta Infant Motor Scale is a scale used for assessing the motor milestone and the motor activities of the child. Very commonly used during assessment. Myself, I commonly, whenever I look into a child, this is a level, this is called as GMFCS. Very important. Anybody who wants to treat as a physiotherapist should never forget this. Gross motor functional classification system is a 5-point system according to the severity of independency of functional capability. What is the functional capability of the child? According to the capability, we divide the children's to mild to severe. So 5 levels are there. For number 1 is the less severe. It's a mildly affected. 5 is a severely dependent child, like a quadriplegic child. So one would be mild, dependence on the parents or in outdoor activities. So this classification system is also very, very important. We have VFIM. FIM is the commonly used scale for or measurement outcome measure scale for assessing the functional independence of any person. So we have for children, cerebral palsy children, we have VFIM. Then for children, cerebral palsy children, to understand the developmental motor skills, we have Peabody developmental motor scales, which is commonly used. Then we have the CAPE and the PEC, which is child assessment of participation and enjoyment, that is CAPE, and the preference of activities for children, that is a PEC. Both can help you under. This is also useful during treatment, like the GMFCS, which I commonly use. You know how where you are standing. If you started treating a patient who is a lower level, then if your treatment is good, the child will climb the outcome measure scale and show improvement in the scoring system and the scales. Pediatric balance scale, which is used for measuring the balance, very essential for gait related activity. We have other gait measures also, but pediatric balance scale is commonly used to measure balance. If the balance is good, the gait pattern is also going to be good, and static activities in balancing activities is going to be good. Modified Ashworth scale for spasticity, commonly called as MAS, is very, very useful, which is also used in other conditions also for assessing and measuring spasticity. Very, very useful in cerebral palsy children, both mainly spastic children's. A screening test, which is used for Denver developmental, because I already told you that in cerebral palsy, screening is understanding a diagnosis early is difficult. So Denver developmental screening test is very useful. PEDI, which is the pediatric evaluation of developmental inventory, is another developmental inventory, very, very useful in the early stage diagnosis. Sensory profile, which is commonly used for children with sensory problem. And then finally we have what we call as the quality of life for children with cerebral palsy. The quality of life is nowadays most commonly used measure of outcome measure. After having all this, the child's life quality should increase. So another last one is called as quality of life for children with cerebral palsy. That measure is also very, very important. Now treatment team in cerebral palsy for cerebral palsy includes mainly planning, treatment and decision making, healthcare professionals, all healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, orthotists and prosthetists, special educators, family and other caregivers, teachers. Treatment, non-operative treatment, mainly diazepam, that is baclofen pump, dantrolene. Baclofen mimics the action of G-aminobutyric acid, a powerful inhibitory neurotransmitter, centrally and peripherally, whereas diazepam potentiates the activities of G-aminobutyric acid. Dantrolene acts as the level of the skeletal muscle, develop profound weakness and hepatotoxicity. So these are the good benefits and the adversities. New trends is that nowadays commonly used is intrathecal baclofen, that is the baclofen is injected into the spinal cord through the lumbar puncture area, commonly fixed in the body of the child itself, and you have the intramuscular botulinum toxin injection. So botulinum toxin is otherwise called as, it is a clostridium produced by the clostridium botulinum. What is the use? It will reduce, it will potent neurotoxin, but it is used to reduce the muscle tone. It will enter the body and it will go to the neuromuscular junction and it will kill it will lyse, we cannot say kill, it will lyse the most of the acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter. So that will reduce the hyperreflexivity or hyperconduction. So contraindications are also there. We cannot continuously use. The only problem is that the effect is only for 3 to 6 months. After that, spasticity will return. Treatment, operative treatment. The operation is for correction of static and dynamic deformity, balance muscle power across the joint, reduce spasticity, reduction of spasticity by neurectomy, and sometimes in cerebral palsy in the cortical area also we do, some areas are there where they do